Okay, here's the next meeting of the investment club. All right, so, oh yeah, actually, 1 second. Indeed, far too lazy. All right, so excuse the whole thing there. Never mind. These people are too good for my pieces of pen and paper. Okay, fine. Questions or points anyone wants to bring up? Okay.
I mean, I think I did before. It's kind of like not. I don't feel like it's widely applicable to like
Okay.
college students.
No, all right, fair enough. All right. Have a sidebar on our own.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we want to look at like when can I get a HELOC, there's a few things here to keep in mind. The first thing is to think about your down payment, right? Your down payment. So this is getting a HELOC. Okay, so there's your down payment. So for the FHA loan, it's 3.5%. For 185K home, that's about $6.5 thousand. Okay, that's just something to keep in mind. So again, when we're looking at the HELOC, we need to have 80% of our loan to value ratio. What this means, as we went over last time, is that so you have a loan for $100,000. This is the loan amount, the principal amount that they gave to you. This is the loan amount, right? At some point, because you're going to be paying this off over time, and of course the property's accruing value and a couple other things, right? You're going to get to $80,000. That's actually owed in the principal amount, right? Below that is where the money starts being able to be used for a HELOC. This is sort of like the beginning mark. It's like before this, you can't fuck with the money between $80,000 and $100,000. You can't do that. It doesn't apply to the HELOC. Everything below that, though, then you start using it. So, for example, if we want to say that it was any amount. Again, when I talked to Chase, it was $25,000. So, just putting that aside, right? Let's just say it's $1. Let's just say it's $1. $1 below $80,000 can now be used for a HELOC. However, remember, it's also 80% that can be used by the HELOC. So it would just be 80 cents, right? Just 80 cents. That's sort of the point there. It doubles. You know what I mean? That's sort of 80% principal, so to speak. It just comes up again. That sort of thing. Anyway. All right. So just getting that out of the way, remembering all that. So when you're calculating when can I get my HELOC, when can I get it, right? You're going to be looking at your down payment, because this is again going to help you in order to reach this mark, right? This is helping you reach this mark. This is helping you get below this mark, so then you can actually use the money, right? So that's the first thing you want to look at, just the down payment, right? The FHA loan, again, this is also presuming again like what is the price of the property, right? It's 185K. There it is, right? Anyways, the next part is the principal payoff. Let's do this for PP. All right. Get your minds out of the gutter. Random ass dick joke. All right, anyways. So the principal payoff, right? So you're making mortgage payments every single month, right? Part of that's going to be interest. Part of it's going to be the principal, right? We talked about this last time, that it's amortized, so it starts out being mainly interest and a little bit of principal, and then 15 years later, 10 years later, whatever, it flips. All of a sudden, it's principal down here, interest up there, because most of your payments is going towards paying off principal. So point is, keep track of this. So let's say it's like, oh, here's like the first year or something like that, and it pays off, I don't know, like $2,500 or something like that. This is the first year. Cool. Bam, combine that, right? There's that amount. What's 80% of 185K? Just 185K times 0.8. That's the number. That's all you need to know. That sort of thing. I mean, I could do it, but you get what I'm saying now. Point is that keep an eye on for like that amount of money that you actually own as per the loan, that principal that still exists, that sort of thing. Keeping in mind the down payment, the paying off the principal, right? Keep track of your payments, and the property value, accruing value, right? So the property value accruing, right? Whatever. Again, we looked at this. This was this across the nation, average to 3.8% annually, right? 3.5%, 3.8% every year. Be conservative about it. That's what I would say, because if you go for like this, then you might I'm gonna do this and go through the cost of like getting a HELOC. I mean, it would be like the worst case scenario, because as I was talking to Chase, it takes $50, just 50, to be able to be like, I want a HELOC, and they're like, cool, we're gonna see if that's like possible for you, that sort of thing. once you actually get approved for the HELOC, then it gets, it's more money thereon. $50 every single year for 10 years, and as well 4 to 5. We'll get into those details, but 4 to 5% interest paid on the the loan that's given out. But we'll get into like why that's significant, what you can do with that sort of thing in order to be able to make money. That's what we're about, right? That's what we're trying to do. Invest, make money. Because if you're losing money in investing, you're not investing. You're just losing money. Like that's it. Like best case scenario, you're a bad investor. So there's that part. Just keeping that in mind. So every single year, it's like, oh hey, look, this first year, this is the thing. All right, cool. Let me look at the 1.85 times 1.035. Right, 3.5%. Bam, it went up by this much. All right, cool. Well, how much is that money? I don't know. It's like $6,500, right? And then you just add that to the difference between the principal amount of the loan, right, that you have as of now, and the property value. Because again, the HELOC acts on the home equity, right? It's a home equity line of credit. The home equity. What is the equity that is of your house? Well, it's this much because it takes into account shit like that. That sort of thing. And everything else, of course. And then one last thing here. I'm wrong.
No.
I was getting that from something else. I know kind of where that was coming from. But no, that's actually really it though. Just looking at your down payment, you're paying off the loan itself, and of course your property accruing value. That's really all you have to look at. So there's that part. All right.
So I guess like back. So equity. What is a definition of equity?
You can look it up online. Google will probably be able to give you a better definition than I could, but because they're like, here are the exact words,
right.
that sort of thing. But in a nutshell, roughly speaking, equity is just, it's like the ownership of value, right? This is equity, right?
Including like all the
how
loans,
it's like used.
tax, like it figures in all the. It's not just like the base value, but it figures in like all these different variables.
Yeah. When we're talking about like how it's usually used, the word itself, equity, right? You're talking about you own equity, you own real estate, you own stocks and that sort of thing. So what is the equity that you have, particularly in the light of housing, that sort of thing? Again, like Google could give a better definition than I am right here, but for our purposes though, and how it's generally used as well, equity just means what is the ownership here? What is the value, the ownership value here? Particularly free and clear, right? If you have like $100,000 in loan for a property, for example, and the property is only worth $80,000, right? It's like, well, here's the equity of the home, which is $80,000, but it's like, no, you're actually underwater right now.
Yeah.
So and then that gets into like the nuances between like revenue and income, and like how they account for like which one accounts for like your net losses and stuff like that. I believe it's like net income sort of thing, and like revenue is just like what is the actual money you make, but that sort of thing, and just like the nuances of words. But point being though, yes, equity is just what is it that you own and how we typically use that. Again, like I can look it up on Google. Google will get it right. Like you know what I mean? They'll know that they got expert
different
word
situations.
people.
There's a context that like figures into the definition.
Yeah. Again, Google has like expert word people. I'm just some dude in college.
I mean, all the better because you're translating it to other college students.
Yeah. I get it. But yeah, again, for the purpose of just a HELOC though, home equity, it's a home equity line of credit, right? What is the available value that you have for yourself? And then, that's the line of credit part where you have like a credit card. There's this like amount of money, like I have $1,000 credit, for my credit card limit, so to speak. So that's the amount of money that we're going to say like, here's what you're entitled to, that sort of thing. Okay, so a little bit about HELOCs. So the interest for these things is 4 to 6% annually, yearly, year, if you want to, whatever. That sort of thing, just to keep in mind. So if we say, hey, $25,000 and again, you're having, principal payments, that sort of thing. But, on your end, it's sort of like a little bit of a rough estimate, because again, like how exactly they want to go about this. If it's like at the end of the year, where it's split over 12 months, that sort of thing, it gets, for every single month, and then here's that annualized and calculated, and it's like math. Anyways, the point is though, you just look at this amount. Here's the loan amount that we have through our HELOC. Okay. And then you look at like, well, it's 5% of this, right? Well, 10% of that is $2,500, and then you have $1,250, right? That's the interest amount that you would be paying at 5%, right? 1,250, right? In the year one. And of course, you're paying this off as time goes on because you're actually, wait, no, I take that back. That's the special thing about the HELOC is that, because this is actually different between, I think a different loan. I'm thinking about like a cash out refinance or something like that. Or actually, wait. No, I think it might be something different. In any case, though, the thing with the HELOC is that for the first, like, it depends on who like you're getting it from, but typically between the first like 10 to like 15 years, something like that, usually like 10, you're just paying off the interest. That's all you're doing. So every single year you're paying off another, $1,250, that sort of thing. That's it over and over again for the first 10 years, because again, you're not paying off this, it stays at 25, right? And then after that, then for like, so many years forward after that, then you're starting to pay this off. And then this is coming from Chase again, is that in order to get a HELOC, it will cost you $50 the first year. And then again, this is on top of everything else. And then $50, right, every single year for 10 years. Right, that sort of thing. Right. Okay. So remember earlier when I was talking about getting $55,000 because you're looking at like, here's the HELOC amount, and then here's also like you're not paying rent, and then here's the rent money that you're getting from the properties, that sort of thing. The point about this, though, to keep in mind, is that you will not be making this sort of money, at least here for our purposes, talking about a HELOC, you will not be making this money if you do not invest it. So again, it's like if you do nothing with that HELOC, guess what you're just doing? You're just paying off the interest, right? You are burning money. You're not doing anything with it. It's just sitting there. It's also being eaten away by inflation, so there's that to keep in mind as well. It's a silent killer for a reason. It's called that. Particularly right now because we're doing like 7% and shit's like crazy. Anyways, but yeah, so make sure that you're investing it to at least, this was again sort of like just a bedrock sort of thing, right? We talk about that over and over and over again. This is like, here's this bedrock, here's this other bedrock, there's this other one. We said that like multiple times throughout, when we were talking about like all the different sort of, prospective amounts of money that we could be making here, that sort of thing. Point about the 55K is that if you do start using it, right? Again, it's only 4 to like 5%. That's really easy to beat. That's really, really easy to beat. It's definitely easy to beat, particularly in light of leveraged ETFs. Just not now. Context, right? We're into like a massive bubble. Don't do that shit. Just don't do it. Leveraged ETFs. Yeah.
ETF,
so
okay.
yeah. And we'll be talking a little bit more about those later. Hopefully next time, because it's not spring break. We can get into the room. I can show you on the projection. We'll be looking at stuff to do with that, cycle analysis. There's more stuff. There's even more that I instead on top of what I was showing you before. In any case, so this is really easy to beat. So the point is that if you're beating this, you're gonna be making more than 55K, right? It's like a terrible fucked up vibe. I'm so sorry. Kill me. Anyways, but yeah. So that's just a point to keep in mind about that. Is that you don't want it to just be sitting there, otherwise you'll be getting killed. And also, as a wider lesson about loans. If you can beat, this is what the rich do, this is what the very, very wealthy do, if you can beat the interest payments, if you can beat their rates, right, you will be making money. You will be making money from the money that you're getting from them, so long as you can beat their interest rates. 45%, very easy to beat, very easy to beat. Even if you were to just go like with the normal S&P 500 over the last like couple decades, it's been getting like 7%, that sort of thing. But again, we're doing better than that because we're doing leverage on like the bets on the own market itself, but context against it, of course. A note about the investment properties is that if you're not going to be having a rental property management group, make sure that like at least every like few months that you like drop in and check in on the property. Just make sure that things are okay. Also, don't announce this. Do not announce this because if you do,
So like I thought like a lot of rental agreements like had like you have to give 24-hour notice at a minimum. That's not like a state law or like.
It actually depends. It totally depends. Yeah. If you come across, which is also another thing when we're talking about city inspections, that's something to keep in mind for the property itself, and making sure that like you're doing things legally, of course. So if they require that, then there it is, that sort of thing. But if you don't have to, then don't do it because obviously the point about it is that like, well, they'll make sure everything's really clean and pretty for you coming over, and then the next day everything's trashed again, that sort of thing.
And you were talking about the cameras, like you have to let the tenants know that there are cameras in the facility, right? And that will probably in itself, like you could probably have that camera off and the property would be better kept than if you didn't have a camera, like at all. Like just the premise of like the idea of being watchful and people like
absolutely, that too, it's just sometimes you get some bad tenants and stuff like that. But again, that's another key point about college students, making sure that like the people that you're allowing into it, it's all the more control on your front as well, instead of just letting some property management group that doesn't really give a shit, they'll just let anyone in. It's the more sort of a point about that. Making sure that when you're like having people come into to be these tenants in your property, be college students, but also make sure that they're like they front themselves in pretty obvious ways and get references and past landlords if you can about like being this like quiet normal person, not trying to like throw a big bash every single other weekend or something like that, that sort of thing. Make the point to it or something like that. They're like, hey, you can go to a party elsewhere, just don't bring it here. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. Just nice and quiet, easy, normal people. That's what you'd be one to look for. But yeah, if you don't have to announce it, don't, because it's easier like that. Okay, so we mentioned as well a term that I meant to delve into a little more, did not though. I've forgotten. I went off to another tangent, but APRs. So what APRs are, what they stand for, is the annualized percentage rate, right? This is what they call the like shopping tool. This is like the shopping tool. They go around for like loans and shit like that. What this applies for is like just in the first year. This is what this applies, because as soon as like so for example, and again this is sort of like the weirdness of it all a little bit, but I was talking to the loan officer, and what they explained was that after the first year, you're not dealing with an APR anymore. What you're going to be dealing with, and I'll get into why, what you're going to be dealing with is just your mortgage rate. You're just going to be dealing with your mortgage rate. That's really it, because the APR is talking about the costs up front in the first year, that in order to like get the loan, primarily speaking, right? That's what that's about. It's a shopping tool, so you can be like, what are they going to charge me in order to be able to get this home loan? What are they going to be able to charge me, stuff like that. However, it's something important to note about this though, right? So let's look at it like this. So the APR also, of course, calculates in the mortgage rate, right? It's just the other upfront cost calculated in. So let's put it like this. Let's say the mortgage rate is like this. So this is just like a hypothetical. Here's like one, and then here's another lender, right? And this is the extra on top of something like that. And then they are like this, less extra, but more of the mortgage rate. See, now prima facie, normally people, right, would just look at these two and just like face value, prima facie, would just say like, oh, well, these are like basically the same. Let's just say hypothetically they are, or they're negligible, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, I guess it doesn't really matter which one I go with, right? However, there's something important to know about this, right? Is that this one's recurring. This one's recurring, so that the mortgage rate is higher on this one, right, than this other one, this other lender, but the upfront costs are less. So it can get a little complicated, because again we're talking about a little bit of unknowns and things to be like a little gray, and talking about like what sort of specifics are at hand here. But and of course again we can look at like different like grants and stuff like that you can get to help with the extra on top here, that sort of thing. So that's something to keep in mind. But to try to put it pretty simply, pretty straightforwardly, what you'd be wanting to consider and understand is that if you were to go with this one, let's say, right, and this is again sort of hypothetical, but let's just try to do something like this, okay? This is conservative. Now this is also delving into the conversation I was wanting to have earlier. ETFs, okay, they can, and this applies for every stock, right? They can get delisted, right? If they crash really heavily, and these things, I actually don't know. And this is why this is also important, because I noted this as well before. It's really important to be aware of these sort of like real estate options, because these things are not really guaranteed for this context that we're looking at right now. Because during this crash, this is what's happened before. We look at the past and like when of other things delisted. They crash, they suddenly delist. We're going to have like the largest stock market crash that's like ever happened. You know what I mean? Because we're in the largest stock market bubble that's ever happened. So
what does delisting mean? Like,
delisting, yeah. So sorry. Thank you for yeah, kind of. Yeah. So delisting just means that you just can't invest it anymore. It's just pulled from the stock market. It's just like doesn't exist anymore. That sort of thing.
And it gets divvied up among the current whatever stockholders are. currently holding stock get their stuff returned, get their holdings
Yeah,
returned
well,
to
so
them?
sometimes, yeah, they have like warrants that they can send out. I was learning this recently actually because I was interested in investing in one of the. I was actually looking at a shorting opportunity for one of the leveraged ETFs for Russia. I decided not to go with it because it was extremely volatile and I didn't want to touch it. It wasn't worth it. Because they could have just easily like screwed me over just for like one day. Well, here's the day. Sorry, all the shorts got screwed, and now we got all these warrants for all the people who were like actually invested in it, were the institutional investors. It just, it just
collect the money, warrants for
warrants, exactly, yeah.
Right.
So for the people who are like they're owed their money, they'll entirely liquidate all the assets of the the company that owns the ETF, or like of what the ETF is entitled to have their assets liquidated, just so they here cash now, and then give it to the stockholders and stuff like that. And then they'll go to the shorts as well, and they'll put up warrants and say, hey, you owe us money. And it's just, So anyways, the point is that delisting just doesn't exist anymore. So anyways, so here's the point about this. The leveraged ETFs, they're the 3 times leverage. They may not exist, but however, it's also important to keep in mind, and they just did this recently as well for another one. They may like go away for a little bit, but keep an eye on it. Every like couple of months or something like that, just look up online really quickly, like here, leverage 3 times particularly, or 4 times even, because that might be a thing one day as well. I don't take it to not be. But just 3 times leveraged ETFs or something like that, and just like see which ones are like available like here now, that sort of thing. If they do go away, if they do. But anyways though, so just sort of like in case, whatever, just as a hypothetical, I just want to say like here's 20%. Anyway, so here's the point, getting back to this. If you say like, okay, well, the thing about this is that if I pay less money up front and I have this okay, so actually, as I was thinking about this before, let's say they're not exactly equal. Let's say they're not exactly equal. Let's say it's like, I'm trying to think about how I want to do this. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. I'm having like a brain fart right now, sorry. Alright. Anyways. So this kind of looks like an extreme example, but the point about this though is just having an analysis on this. So let's say that you're looking at these 2 different loans. Like, don't take it so literally. It's just sort of like this one's a little higher than this other one. That sort of thing. It's like close. Like generally speaking, that's what you like have your mind focused for. Anyways, you look at this one. It's like, oh well, it's obviously like this is the APR. Like this is small. I'm going to go with this one. However, there's something important to know about this though, is that the upfront costs for this one are higher than this one. So what this means is that if you go with this one, right, these upfront costs. So let me try to let me think about how I'm gonna do this. No wait, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm having a brain fart. Hold on a second, I need to think about this. Like my I don't know why it's not working. All right, thank you for your patience. I found the words. The brain fart is over. Intermission gone, done. Hopefully you got your snacks and your popcorn. All right, we're back to the show. Let's go. All right. So the point about this is that if you're looking at these 2 different situations, right, you can see like pretty straightforwardly here. Okay, so just make sure we're mapping onto each other here, right? So the mortgage rate, here's the mortgage rate that's always going to stay there, right? This collectively is the APR. The extra part here is just these like upfront costs that they're gonna put to you, and it's going to make up the APR, right? You can see from here, right, that this one, right? Let's just call this, loan number 1, and then this is loan number 2. Okay, you can see from this one, right, that this is lower than this one. So the APR, right, it's going to be lower than that one. Here's the sort of thing to think about though, and it's important because you can be dealing with a lot of money. So it's worth at least a venture of mind. Is that if you were to, okay, I had the words. Hold on a second. If you were to like look at this one, like, okay, well here, let me go for this. It's got less upfront cost. However, the mortgage rate is higher. You can see that, right? The lines don't line up there, right? The mortgage rate is higher than this other one, right? So the point about this is that if you were to look at this amount of money, and you were to say, okay, well, it's gonna cost me more up front, this amount, this, you know, chunk right here, cost me more up front. So the point about this is that you can look at the mortgage rate, how much, so again, this is gonna come down to like a dollar like cost amount. So we can even just go to like the first year. That's probably all we would need to do. Just like the first year simply, right? So in the first year, let's just say like hypothetically, that because you went with this second loan, the mortgage rate, right, because it's lower, it would have saved you $100 or something like that, right? This is $100 more, right? Just to say that, right? However, the upfront costs though are like, I don't know, like 50 or something like that. So you would have saved, if you went with number one, it's just a number. Number one there, you would have saved yourself, right, the $50 cost right there, right? However, if you went with the number two here, right, it would have been $100, $100 less after like the first year or something like that. The point about this that I wanted to make to you guys is that I'm having a brain fart. This sucks. Like I just had the words. I'm much. You guys know me. I'm much more like usually articulate than this. You say it was spring break.
It's spring break. You
I
don't,
know,
you
really.
know, you don't have to be on top of your game though.
The cannabis in here.
Yeah.
People at home are just gonna be like, next 5 seconds, next 5 seconds. Let's go ahead. Jesus, man, I just had the words too. I'm sorry, I think there's something wrong. There's like a bug in my head going, you know. If you went with loan number one, you would save yourself $50, right? You would save yourself going with loan number one in the first year, so to speak. However, after time though, you would save yourself $100 with, you know, the mortgage rate there. If you went with loan number two, right, you would save yourself, right, $100 in like you know, year two or something like that, because again, you get rid of this after the first year. This just saved. Yeah. Okay. All right. I got it. This is just for save the first year. Now the point about this is that if you take this money, right, because you're saving this amount of money right there. Okay. This is the $50. If you use this money, and again, we talked about this before about investment potential, right? So if you take this money and you say, okay, well, I'm going to go all the way over here to leverage ETFs or something like that, or some other investment opportunity, whatever the hell you find, but probably these. And what happens is that after like, you know, year two or something like that, right, it's now gone up to, you know, $125. Your 50 turned into $125 after 2 years, right, that sort of thing. Again, we talked about this one saving you $100. Now mind you, it also cost you $50 in the first year, so really it actually only saved you $50. That's sort of the point about that. And this turns into like 125, right? If you did nothing with this $50, right, this one would have saved you the 50. This one would have actually eventually been the better one, because, and on top of that, year over year, right, it would have kept saving you money because it's the lower mortgage rate. However, if you go with this one, you use the money that you get to save from it, that sort of thing, and you use it, and then you put it towards these leveraged ETFs or something like that, and you find yourself like, well, wait a second, I actually made like $125, or maybe something less. Maybe it's only like you know, we want to be 50. So let's just say, you know, it doesn't matter. It's 125. These are hypotheticals, but that sort of thing. So you can kind of really ignore this. This is just sort of like this was more of a tangent sort of thing. But anyways, point about this is that you have this by the end of year two, and you allow it to keep compounding, that sort of thing. You don't really touch it or anything like that. It will keep beating this one time and time again. If you look at like, well, how much did this money like accrue, you know, this year and the next year and that sort of thing. And you can look at like based off history and that sort of thing. But point being is that like, oh well, it's making me more money to be able to do this. Again, this is sort of like why you have to put yourself in sort of a hypothetical before you're actually doing this, because once you're actually doing it, then you've already gotten the loan. So you have to look at it as a hypothetical and be like, well, how much money could I be making, that sort of thing. Again, and that's the tangent part a little bit, but it's kind of important to know about like, well, what happens if the 3 times leveraged ETFs go away, that sort of thing. But point is, it's just something to be aware of. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
It's where you put your money and at what time, like timing's everything, and like what you are able to do in different times with what you got.
Yeah, we're trying to look at investment potential here. This is sort of it's just something important to note about because it can be very misleading. APRs this is the shopping tool. They can be misleading though because what can happen is like, oh, well, here's the lesser one, but I had to have a higher mortgage rate for this one because there was less upfront or anything like that. It's something like that. You know what I mean? And because of that, if I had gone with like this one, it would have I could have like used this money because it would have if I had gone with this one. The point about this is that if you're looking at these two situations and you're like, well, this one's like, it's less, but the mortgage rate is higher. I can take this money that I would have used from this one and be able to make more money than I would have been able to save from getting the lower, the lower mortgage rate, that sort of thing.
Yeah, do you want to save the money now, or do you want to save the money later? Because if you save the money now, then you can do something with it, and then, even though it would appear to save you more later, yeah.
I know, I'm getting tongue-tied myself. Again, I'm usually more articulate than this, but I hope it makes sense, though.
Abstract sort of stuff.
It's just have a focus on mind about what you could be using, what you could be getting through using the investment potential of your money, that sort of thing. And also, ask for the parts of the APR. Do not just take an APR at face value. Ask about what are the parts that make up this APR so that I can more accurately compare it to what other people are charging. That's the point. That's the main point. Get into all this sort of stuff and get a little funky, but again, because we're working with hypotheticals and unknowns and stuff like that, it's is it going to work out exactly it's just weird. But anyways, though, that was the main point that I wanted to articulate about that. That was just, APRs. Make sure you know what's going into them because it can be misleading. What you thought was the better deal could turn out to not be the better deal because it could cost you in terms of your investment potential. That's the point about that. Yeah, I don't know why that was so hard to articulate. Anyways.
Investment potential has more value than the dollar amount that you're going to be saving at any given time.
Potentially, that's something to explore and to throw hypotheticals at and be like, okay, well, what happens if I were to take this and then use leverage ETFs and then be able to make 30% or 20% or something like that, just even to be a little conservative. Again, the ones we were looking at over several years, what the best one that I found was 70%, CAGR over year, which is a lot. And we don't know if those are going to survive this crash. We don't know. But worst case scenario, they'll come back. That's something to note because they do that. Particularly these sorts of things. They're useful like that. They'll delist, that sort of thing, but they'll come back. Someone else will create them again so that it can rise over the next many, many years. That sort of thing. That's what they do. Okay, something else to note, city inspection and contractor walkthrough. I was learning about this recently, and it was, exactly another sort of thing to continue learning about. I'm always continuing to learn, and anything I learn that's hey, this is notable, I will let you guys know. But make sure that before you actually get the house, and you're just to make sure that it is, in code and what needs to happen, this is sort of the point about the contractor walkthrough, is that with the city inspection, right, before you buy the place, this is before, right, is that they'll come by and they'll say well, this thing needs to get done, this thing needs to get done, this thing needs to get done, to make sure that it's in code, it's within code, you know what I mean? And then the contractor walkthrough part to be they'll come by and be okay, cool, here's, the cost for this one, and for this one, and for that one. This thing's dying on me.
The cost to bring it up to code if it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so just want to make sure. Can they see that? Yeah, they can see that. Anyway, so yeah, and then and just to be able to make sure that everything. There it is. Okay, that's better. Yeah. Okay, just be able to make sure that yes, this is good. This is good. Or not even good. Anyway, sorry. Misspoke. What is the cost to be able to fix these things? And then you bring that into well, here's this other property, again, investment potential, that sort of thing, about looking at the, I mean, not even necessarily, you could rub that in, but not to make things complicated, just simply straightforwardly, immediate cost. And we're get, here's this one property that's $5,000 more than the other one. However, the one that's $5,000 cheaper, right? If we were to say, if we were to say we have a property that's 185 and another one that's 190, right? This one, however, is going to need $10,000 worth of code stuff. You know, contractors, they come by, they need $10,000, and you're like, to even be able to start renting it, that sort of thing, right? This is the cheaper option because it doesn't need this, it's all up to code and shit like that. It's the same thing, same principle. Okay. Okay. Something else to note that is important, crime rates. You can look this up online. You can talk to the real estate agents in the area. There are resources available to you. Go ahead and research, look it up. It's worth the time and effort and all that sort of jazz because you want to make sure that the area that you're investing in is not like high crime or anything like that, dealing with a lot of that sort of stuff, or that the crime is like on a rise and they're having a lot of problems on that front. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, this is sort of like in line with, I said, you can look at, online, you can do research about like the highest growing cities in the country, that sort of thing, right? Look as well into like, well, here's the states that got high growth, how much crime is happening in it though, is the crime rising a lot, are they having problems on that front? And as well, whether there are laws, again, this is something that you would want to talk to like the local real estate agents about, that'd probably be the idea, whether their laws are more landlord friendly or more friendly towards, the tenant. In other words, this city is much more lax about you immediately kicking out or very soon kicking out a tenant who's like doing terrible things, or like this, and as compared to this other city that's like, nope, you gotta wait like 3 months in order to be able to, get them out, and it's just like not paying rent, they're just destroying property and all that sort of jazz. That sort of thing. So something to keep in mind.
And there's like caps on how much you can charge people in some places, right? Like,
yeah, and all that sort of stuff, right? Just like, what place has obviously like more preference towards the landlords.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we talked before about like a part of your mortgage is going to be your homeowner's insurance, that sort of thing. Something else to grow on is that, because I was thinking that like, oh well, the LLC will like cover these sorts of things. It doesn't matter anyway. So